Clara Bennett dropped to her knees in the frozen mud, her black mourning dress soaking through, as she stared at the smoke rising from her own chimney. Someone was living in her house. Her husband had been dead for 4 months. She had buried him with her own hands, traveled 300 miles to nurse her dying mother, and now she had come home to find strangers occupying the ranch she had bled for. Her hands shook as she watched a man step onto her porch holding a baby. Behind him, 7 more children appeared like ghosts. 8 children. And not a single one was hers. If you've ever felt like life took everything from you and then demanded more, subscribe to this channel and follow Clara's story to the very end. Comment below which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wagon wheels had barely stopped turning when Clara saw the first sign something was wrong. Fresh firewood, stacked neat against the side of her house. Firewood she hadn't cut, hadn't asked anyone to cut, hadn't given permission for. Hold up. She grabbed the driver's arm. Something ain't right. Old Pete squinted toward the house. Want me to fetch the sheriff, Mrs. Bennett? No. Clara climbed down before he could offer his hand. This is my land. I'll handle it myself. Her boots hit the frozen ground. 4 months away. 4 months nursing her mother back from the edge of death, and in that time, someone had made themselves comfortable in her home. She walked toward the porch, each step deliberate. The door opened before she reached it. A man stood there. Tall, gaunt, wearing clothes that had seen too many washings. He held a baby wrapped in a worn blanket, and behind him, Clara counted them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 children of various ages, all staring at her with wide, frightened eyes. Who the hell are you? Clara's voice came out harder than she intended. And what are you doing in my house? The man removed his hat with his free hand. Ma'am, I'm Samuel Hawkins. I've been expecting you. Expecting me? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mister, you're standing in my doorway holding a baby that ain't mine, surrounded by children I've never seen, and you're telling me you've been expecting me? Yes, ma'am. His voice was steady, almost gentle. Judge Morrison said you'd be back any day now. Clara's blood ran cold. Judge Morrison sent you here. In a manner of speaking. Samuel shifted the baby to his other arm. Ma'am, I know this is a shock. Maybe we should talk inside. We'll talk right here. Clara planted her feet. Start explaining. Now. Samuel took a breath. Mrs. Bennett, I'm your husband's brother. The words didn't make sense. Clara heard them, but they didn't connect to anything real. William didn't have a brother. Half-brother, ma'am. Same mother, different circumstances. Samuel's jaw tightened. His mother had me when she was 16, unmarried. Her family made her give me up. She married William's father 3 years later and had William. He never knew I existed. Clara shook her head slowly. That's a lie. I wish it was, ma'am. I truly do. William told me everything about his family. His mother died when he was 12. His father raised him alone. There was never any mention of a brother, half or otherwise. Because she never told him. Samuel's voice dropped. She kept me secret her whole life, even from William. Clara stared at this stranger, this man claiming to be family to her dead husband, and felt rage building in her chest like a winter storm. You expect me to believe this? I have documents, ma'am. Birth certificate, adoption papers. Judge Morrison verified everything. Documents can be forged. They can, but these weren't. Samuel met her eyes without flinching. I didn't come here to take anything from you, Mrs. Bennett. I came because... Because what? Clara stepped closer. Because you heard my husband died and saw an opportunity. Widow woman alone, no children, vulnerable. Is that what you thought? No, ma'am. Then why are you here? Why are your children eating my food and sleeping in my beds? The oldest girl, maybe 12 years old, moved forward. Pa let me. Grace. Samuel's voice was soft but firm. Go inside. Take your brothers and sisters. But Pa... Now, Grace. The girl hesitated, then nodded. She began herding the other children back through the door, but Clara caught her looking back, eyes full of something that looked like fear. When the door closed, Samuel spoke again. Mrs. Bennett, I know how this looks. Strange man shows up with 8 children, claims to be family, moves into your home while you're away. I understand why you're angry. You don't understand anything. Maybe not. He put his hat back on. But I'll tell you the truth anyway. 6 months ago, my wife died giving birth to this little one. He looked down at the baby. Mary was everything to me. When she passed, I had 8 children and no way to care for them. I was working in the mines, earning barely enough to feed half of them. We were living in a shack with holes in the roof, Mrs. Bennett. My children were hungry. My baby daughter didn't have enough milk. Clara said nothing. Judge Morrison found me 2 months ago, said he was settling your husband's estate and discovered some old papers that proved William's mother had another son. That son was me. Samuel's voice was steady, but Clara could see his hands trembling slightly. He told me that under Wyoming law, as William's brother, I had claim to half the inheritance, half this ranch. Half. The word came out like a curse. Yes, ma'am. Half of everything. Clara's vision blurred. 10 years. 10 years she had worked this land alongside William. 10 years of hoping for children that never came, of building something from nothing, of surviving winters that killed weaker folk. And now this stranger wanted half of it. Get out. Samuel didn't move. Ma'am? I said get out. Take your children and get off my property. Mrs. Bennett, I have a legal right to be here. Judge Morrison said... I don't care what Judge Morrison said. Clara's voice cracked. This is my home. Mine. I buried my husband here. I planted that garden with my own hands. I mended those fences, I birthed those calves, I survived every blizzard and every drought for 10 years. And you think you can just walk in and take half because of some piece of paper? I don't want to take anything. Then leave. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Where would I go? Clara opened her mouth to answer, then stopped, because she knew the answer. She could see it in his hollow cheeks, in his threadbare coat, in the way he held that baby, like she was the only precious thing he had left. He had nowhere to go. That's not my problem, she said, but the words felt hollow. No, ma'am, it's not. Samuel straightened. I'll get my children. We'll leave tonight. He turned toward the door. Clara watched him reach for the handle. She thought of those 7 children inside, thought of the baby in his arms, thought of the snow that was already starting to fall. Wait! Samuel stopped but didn't turn around. Where will you take them? It's nearly dark. Temperature's dropping. I'll figure something out. In a blizzard, with 8 children. I've managed before. Clara's jaw clenched. Every instinct told her to let him go. Let him walk into the snow with his children and his claims and his documents. Let someone else deal with this mess. But she could hear her mother's voice in her head clear as day. Clara Ruth, you can be hard, but don't you ever be cruel. Cruelty's a poison that kills the one who carries it. She cursed under her breath. You can stay tonight. One night. In the barn. Samuel turned. The barn? You got a problem with that? No, ma'am, the barn is fine. Better than fine. Something flickered in his eyes. Gratitude maybe, or relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow morning I'm going to see Judge Morrison myself, and if those papers of yours are forged, I'll see you arrested. They're not forged. We'll see about that. Clara pushed past him and walked into her own house for the first time in 4 months. It was cleaner than she'd left it. Someone had swept the floors, scrubbed the table, organized the pantry. The children were huddled in the corner of the main room watching her with wide eyes, 8 of them ranging from the 12-year-old girl to the baby in Samuel's arms. Clara looked at them, and felt something twist in her chest. 10 years of trying for a child. 10 years of hoping, praying, consulting every doctor and midwife between here and Denver. 10 years of empty cradles and silent nights. And this stranger had 8. Grace. Samuel spoke to the oldest girl. Gather everyone's things. We're sleeping in the barn tonight. The barn? The girl's eyes darted to Clara. But, Pa, Mrs. Bennett has been generous enough to let us stay on her property. We'll be comfortable in the barn. Grace nodded slowly, then began directing her siblings. Clara watched them move the way the older ones automatically helped the younger ones, the way they communicated with glances and small gestures, the way they operated as a unit, a family. That's what they were. A family without a mother struggling to survive. Mrs. Bennett. Clara turned. Samuel was standing near the door, hat in hand again. I meant what I said. I don't want to take anything from you. He paused, searching for words. I just need somewhere safe for my children. If you let us stay, I'll work for it. Every day from sunup to sundown. I'll earn our keep. You're claiming half my ranch and you're offering to work for room and board. The law says I have a right to half. But rights aren't the same as what's right. Samuel's gaze was steady. You built this place. You and your husband. I know that. I respect that. Then give up your claim. I can't. Can't or won't. Can't. His voice hardened. My children need a home, Mrs. Bennett. They need food, shelter, a future. If I give up my claim, I give up their only chance. Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that his children weren't her responsibility, that his problems weren't her problems, that he should have thought about all this before showing up on her doorstep. But she was tired. Bone-deep tired from months of caring for her mother, from years of caring for a husband who couldn't give her the one thing she wanted most. One night, she repeated. We'll sort out the rest tomorrow. Samuel nodded. He gathered his children and led them toward the barn. Clara watched them go, 8 small figures and 1 tall one, trudging through the falling snow. The baby started crying. Clara heard Samuel's low voice, soothing, gentle, and then the crying stopped. She closed the door and leaned against it, pressing her palms to her eyes. What the hell am I going to do, be? The next morning, Clara was awake before dawn. She hadn't slept every time she closed her eyes. She saw Samuel's face, heard his voice, thought about those 8 children in her barn. She dressed quickly and headed for town. The snow had stopped, but the roads were thick with it. By the time she reached Judge Morrison's office, her fingers were numb. Mrs. Bennett? The judge rose from his desk, surprise evident on his face. I wasn't expecting you back so soon. How is your mother? She'll live. Clara didn't sit down. Tell me about Samuel Hawkins. The judge's expression shifted. Ah, so you've met him. Met him, I found him living in my house with 8 children. Yes, I should have sent word, but I didn't know when you'd return, and the situation was urgent. Tell me the truth. Clara leaned forward. Are those documents real? Judge Morrison sighed. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. I had them verified myself. Birth certificate from Missouri, dated 1838. Adoption records from the same year. Samuel Hawkins is indeed the son of Margaret Ellen Hawkins, your husband's mother. Clara sank into a chair. So it's true. I'm afraid so. And the law says that without a will, a deceased man's property is divided between his widow and his siblings. Half and half. The judge spread his hands. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Clara stared at the documents. Official. Verified. Legal. He never knew, she murmured. William never knew he had a brother. Apparently not. His mother kept the secret until her death, and her family was hardly going to volunteer the information. 10 years. Clara's voice cracked. 10 years I was married to that man, and he never told me anything about a brother. Because he didn't know. Because his mother lied to everyone. Judge Morrison was quiet. Clara took a breath. What are my options? You can contest the inheritance. Hire a lawyer, drag it through the courts. But I'll be honest, you'll likely lose, and you'll spend a fortune doing it. Or you can negotiate. Samuel seems like a reasonable man. Perhaps you can come to some arrangement that works for both of you. He offered to give up his claim entirely if I let him and his children live on the property. Let him work for room and board. The judge raised an eyebrow. That's remarkably generous of him. It's suspicious is what it is. Or perhaps he's simply a desperate father with 8 children to feed. Clara didn't respond. Mrs. Bennett, I've spent 2 months with Samuel Hawkins. I've seen how he is with those children. He's not a schemer. He's not trying to take advantage of you. The judge leaned forward. He's a man who lost his wife, who was living in poverty, who suddenly discovered he had family and a chance to give his children a better life. By taking half of what I built. By accepting what the law says is rightfully his. The judge's tone was gentle but firm. I know this is hard, but perhaps there's a way forward that doesn't involve courts and lawyers and years of bitterness. Clara stood. Thank you for your time, Judge. What are you going to do? She didn't answer. She walked out of the office and stood in the cold breath fogging in the morning air. Half her ranch. Half of everything she and William had built. Gone to a stranger because of a secret that William's mother had carried to her grave. Clara thought about the baby. Lily Samuel had called her. 6 months old. Born the same day her mother died. She thought about Grace, the oldest girl, with her 2 old eyes and her protective stance. She thought about all 8 of them sleeping in her barn last night. Probably cold, probably scared, probably wondering what would happen to them. And she thought about the nursery. The room she and William had prepared 10 years ago, painted pale yellow, furnished with a cradle William had built himself. The room that had sat empty for a decade, door closed, gathering dust. 10 years, she whispered to no one. 10 years of empty arms. She climbed onto her wagon and headed back to the ranch. When Clara arrived home, she found Samuel in the barn milking her cow. The children were scattered around him, the boys trying to help the girls watching over the younger ones. Samuel looked up when she entered. His expression was carefully neutral, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. I spoke to Judge Morrison, she said. Samuel set down the milk pail and stood. And the documents are real. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or resignation. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett. Are you? Yes. He met her eyes. I'm sorry my existence means you lose half of what you built. I'm sorry my mother's choices have consequences for you. I'm sorry you came home to find strangers in your house. He paused. But I can't be sorry for trying to give my children a future. Clara studied him. This man who shared blood with her husband but was nothing like him. William had been charming, smooth, full of easy promises. Samuel was rough-edged, direct, honest to a fault. What was your wife like? She heard herself ask. Surprise crossed Samuel's face. Mary. You said she died giving birth to the baby. What was she like? Samuel was quiet for a moment. She was kind, patient, stronger than me, though she never would have said so. His voice softened. She could make anything feel like home. A cabin, a tent, a wagon. Didn't matter. If Mary was there, it was home. Clara felt her throat tighten. You loved her. More than my own life. How long were you married? 14 years. 14 years. 8 children. A love strong enough to still show in his voice 6 months after her death. Clara thought of William. Thought of the 10 years she'd spent hoping for children that never came. Thought of the guilt she'd carried, the shame of being a barren wife. I need to ask you something, she said slowly. And I need you to tell me the truth. Ask. In those papers Judge Morrison found, was there anything about my husband's medical history? Samuel frowned. Medical history? Doctor's reports, examination results, anything like that? I don't know. Why? Clara's heart was pounding. Because I spent 10 years married to William trying to have a child, and I could never figure out why it wasn't happening. Doctors said there was nothing wrong with me, but the baby never came. She took a breath. I need to know if there's a reason. Samuel's expression shifted. Mrs. Bennett, I don't know anything about. But Judge Morrison might. Clara was already moving toward the barn door. Stay here. Watch your children. I'll be back. She rode back to town faster this time. When she burst into Judge Morrison's office, the judge looked alarmed. Mrs. Bennett, is everything? The papers you found. Were there any medical documents? Anything about William's health? The judge hesitated. There were some papers I set aside. Personal correspondence, medical reports. I didn't think they were relevant to the inheritance, so I hadn't. Show me. He opened another drawer and pulled out a smaller folder. Clara's hands trembled as she took it. Letters, bills, and there a doctor's report from Denver dated 8 years ago. She read it again. The words blurred. Mrs. Bennett. Judge Morrison's voice was distant. Are you all right? She wasn't all right. She would never be all right again, because the report said in cold clinical language that William Theodore Bennett was sterile, incapable of fathering children, and he had been informed of this diagnosis during his visit. 8 years ago. William had known. For 8 years he had known that he couldn't give her children. And he had never told her. He had let her blame herself, let her visit doctor after doctor, let her cry herself to sleep, wondering what was wrong with her. He had known. And he had let her suffer. Clara folded the paper carefully, placed it in her pocket, stood up. Mrs. Bennett, thank you, Judge. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. I have what I needed. She walked out of the office, climbed onto her wagon, sat there for a long moment staring at nothing. 8 years of lies. 8 years of silent cruelty. Her husband, the man she had loved, had trusted, had built a life with, had watched her break year after year and said nothing. Clara thought of Samuel, of his 8 children, of the irony so sharp it could draw blood. William's brother had everything William had denied her, and now William was dead, and his secret was exposed, and Clara didn't know whether to scream or cry or laugh. She chose none of those things. She clicked her tongue, and the horse started moving, and she headed back to Stillwater Ranch to face the man who had just inherited half of her broken dreams. Samuel was waiting on the porch when she returned. The children were inside. She could hear them through the walls, voices low and uncertain. You were gone a long time, Samuel said. Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her legs felt unsteady. I found something. Something about William. Something about why I never had children. Samuel went still. What do you mean? Clara pulled the folded paper from her pocket. William knew. 8 years ago, a doctor told him he was sterile, that he could never father children. Her voice cracked. He knew Samuel, and he never told me. He let me think it was my fault. He let me blame myself for 10 years. Samuel's face changed. The neutrality vanished, replaced by something raw, anger maybe, or grief. That's... He stopped, started again. Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry. Are you? Clara heard the bitterness in her own voice. Your brother kept me in the dark for 8 years. Let me suffer. And now you show up with 8 children. 8, and I'm supposed to what? Welcome you, split everything with you, act like this is some kind of blessing. I'm not asking you to act like anything. Then what are you asking? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Nothing. I'm not asking for anything, Mrs. Bennett. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'll take my children and go. We'll figure something out. And give up your legal claim. If that's what it takes. His jaw tightened. I told you I don't want to take what's yours. I never did. I just wanted a chance. A chance for my children to have something better than a leaky shack and empty stomachs. He looked toward the house where the sounds of children had gone silent. But not like this. Not by adding to your pain. Clara stared at him. This man who could have demanded, who could have fought, who could have made her life miserable with lawyers and courts and legal battles. This man who was offering to walk away. Where would you go? She asked. If you leave here, where would you take them? I don't know. You don't have a plan? No, ma'am. Then how? I'll figure it out. Samuel's voice was firm. I always do. That's what fathers do. Clara looked at the house, at the smoke rising from her chimney, at the fresh firewood stacked against the wall. She thought of the empty nursery, the yellow walls, the cradle gathering dust. She thought of 8 children who had lost their mother, who had almost lost everything else, who were right now huddled inside her house, waiting to find out if they would be cast into the snow. 1 week, she said. Samuel blinked. Ma'am? You can stay 1 week. We'll figure out the legal situation, see what our options are. She met his eyes. But you work for your keep, every day sunup to sundown, and your children help too, the ones old enough anyway. Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Yes, ma'am. And I'm not sharing the main house. You and your children stay in the barn. I'll have the boys help you clear out the old section, make it livable. Yes, ma'am. And one more thing. What's that? Clara took a breath. Stop calling me ma'am. My name is Clara. Something shifted in Samuel's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. All right, Clara. He put his hat back on. I'll get the children started on chores. He turned toward the house. Clara watched him go, this stranger who had upended her entire life in less than 24 hours. Samuel. He stopped. For what it's worth, she said. I'm sorry about your wife. Samuel didn't turn around, but his voice when it came was rough with something she recognized. Thank you. He walked inside. The door closed behind him. Clara stood alone on the porch, the medical report still in her pocket, the weight of 8 years of lies pressing down on her chest. Her husband was dead. His secret was exposed. His brother was living in her barn, and somewhere in that barn 8 children were waiting to see what kind of woman she would turn out to be. Clara didn't know the answer yet, but she had 1 week to figure it out. The first morning came hard and cold. Clara woke before dawn, same as always, but the silence she expected wasn't there. Instead, she heard voices from the barn, children's voices, and the low rumble of Samuel giving instructions. She stood at the window and watched them emerge in the gray light. Grace carried the baby bundled against the cold. Thomas and Henry headed toward the woodpile. The younger ones followed Samuel toward the cattle pen. 8 children, working before sunrise, not because anyone forced them, but because that's what they knew. That's what survival looked like. Clara turned away from the window and started breakfast. She made enough for herself, same as always. Eggs, biscuits, coffee. She sat at her table in her quiet house and ate alone. But the sounds kept drifting in. A child's laugh quickly shushed. Samuel's voice patient and steady. The thunk of an axe hitting wood. Clara set down her fork, stared at her plate. This is ridiculous, she muttered. She grabbed her coat and walked to the barn. Samuel was showing Thomas how to check the fence posts for rot. Both of them looked up when she approached. Have your children eaten? Clara asked. Samuel's expression flickered. We had some bread left over from yesterday. Bread. Yes, ma'am. Clara. Clara looked at Thomas. The boy was maybe 10 years old, already working like a man, and he'd started his day with stale bread. Bring them inside, she said. I'll make breakfast. Samuel hesitated. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. Clara turned back toward the house. 15 minutes. Don't be late. She didn't wait for his response. In the kitchen, she pulled out more eggs, more flour, more bacon. She worked quickly, efficiently, trying not to think too hard about what she was doing or why. 15 minutes later, the door opened. Samuel came in first, stamping snow off his boots. Then the children, one by one, smallest to largest. They moved like they were afraid of breaking something. "Sit down," Clara said. "Anywhere's fine." Nobody moved. Grace spoke first. "Ma'am, we don't want to be any trouble." "You're not trouble. You're hungry." Clara set a plate of biscuits on the table. "Sit." Slowly, they sat. 8 children arranged around her table, filling seats that had been empty for 10 years. Samuel stood near the door, hat in his hands. "You too," Clara said. "Can't work on an empty stomach." Samuel sat at the far end of the table, leaving space between himself and the children closest to him. Clara noticed that. Noticed how he was trying to take up as little room as possible. She served the food in silence. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter. The children stared at the plates like they'd never seen so much food in one place. "Eat," Clara said. "It's getting cold." They ate. Carefully at first, then with increasing speed. The little one, Charles, the 6-year-old, made a small sound of pleasure that he quickly tried to hide. Clara watched them and felt something crack inside her chest. "When's the last time you all had a proper meal?" she asked. Silence. Samuel answered. "Been a while." "How long is a while?" "Long enough." Clara looked at the children. Really looked. At their too thin faces, their worn clothes, their careful movements. These weren't children who took food for granted. These were children who knew what hunger felt like. "From now on," she said slowly, "you eat breakfast here, in the house, every morning." Grace's eyes went wide. "Ma'am? And lunch? And supper?" Clara picked up her coffee cup, mostly to have something to do with her hands. "Can't have workers fainting in my fields because they're half-starved." Samuel's voice was rough. "Clara, that's practical." She cut him off. "Nothing more. Don't read anything into it." But Grace was looking at her differently now. Like maybe she wasn't the enemy. Like maybe there was something else happening here. "Thank you," the girl said quietly. "For the food." Clara nodded once and turned back to the stove. "Finish up. Daylight's wasting." The week passed faster than Clara expected. Every morning the children filed into her kitchen for breakfast. Every evening they gathered again for supper. Clara told herself it was practical, efficient, easier to cook one big meal than worry about what they were scrounging in the barn. She told herself a lot of things that week. Samuel worked harder than any hired hand she'd ever had. He mended fences, split wood, tended cattle, cleaned the barn. He never complained, never asked for rest, never stopped moving. Clara found herself watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice. "You're going to kill yourself," she said on the 4th day, finding him hauling water in the freezing cold. "Slow down." Samuel wiped sweat from his forehead. "Can't slow down. Got to earn our keep." "You've earned your keep 3 times over already." "Then I'm working on next week." Clara shook her head. "Stubborn fool. Takes one to know one." The words came out before either of them expected. Samuel's eyes widened slightly like he'd surprised himself. Clara felt her lips twitch despite everything. "Fair point," she said. That was the first almost smile they shared. On the 5th day, trouble arrived in the form of Cornelius Wade. Clara heard the horse before she saw it. She was in the kitchen teaching Ruth Ann how to knead bread dough when the sound of hooves made her look up. "Stay here," she told the girl. "Keep working." She stepped onto the porch just as Wade dismounted. He was a big man, well-fed, well-dressed, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Mrs. Bennett." He tipped his hat. "Heard you were back. Wanted to pay my respects." "That's kind of you, Mr. Wade." Also heard you've got some company. His eyes drifted to the barn where Samuel was working with the older boys. Quite a situation you've got yourself into. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Wade's smile widened. Strange man shows up, claims half your land. 8 mouths to feed. Must be overwhelming for a woman alone. Clara kept her face neutral. I'm managing. I'm sure you are. But you shouldn't have to manage. Wade stepped closer. I've been wanting to expand my operation, Mrs. Bennett. Your land borders mine perfectly. I could take this whole mess off your hands. Give you enough money to start fresh somewhere else, somewhere without complications. My land isn't for sale. Now don't be hasty. Think about it. You'd be free of this dispute, free of these strangers, free of all this burden. Wade lowered his voice. Word travels, Mrs. Bennett. People are talking. Widow living with a man and 8 children doesn't look proper. Doesn't look proper at all. Clara felt anger rising. People can talk all they want. Can they? What about when they stop talking and start acting? Wade shrugged. Small town, limited business. How long before people stop buying your cattle because they don't approve of your living arrangements? Are you threatening me? I'm advising you, as a neighbor, as a friend. We're not friends, Mr. Wade. Something cold flickered in Wade's eyes. No, I suppose we're not. He mounted his horse. Think about my offer. I'll give you a fair price. More than fair considering the circumstances. He looked toward the barn again. Before this situation gets any more complicated. He rode away without waiting for her response. Clara stood on the porch, hands clenched at her sides. She was still standing there when Samuel approached. Who was that? Cornelius Wade. Owns the big spread east of here. What did he want? My land. Samuel's jaw tightened. Because of me. Because of the situation. Clara finally unclenched her hands. Don't flatter yourself. Wade's been sniffing around this property for years. He's just using you as an excuse. But I'm making it worse. Clara didn't answer because the truth was complicated. Wade would have come eventually with or without Samuel, but Samuel made her vulnerable. Samuel gave Wade ammunition. We should talk, she said. Tonight, after the children are asleep. Samuel nodded. I'll be there. That night they sat on the porch in the cold. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and watched her breath fog in the air. Judge Morrison says we have options, she began. I can buy out your half if I had the money, which I don't. You can buy out my half, which I definitely don't have. Or we can divide the land physically, split everything down the middle. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Would that work? Half a ranch? Not really. The water source is on one side, the best grazing on the other. Split it down the middle, and neither half works properly. So we're stuck. Seems like it. They sat in silence. Somewhere in the barn, a child coughed. Clara heard Samuel shift his attention, pulling toward the sound before returning. There's another option, he said finally. One I mentioned before. You giving up your claim. Yes. And I already told you. I know what you told me. Samuel turned to face her. But Clara, I've been watching you this week. You don't just work this land, you love it. Every fence post, every animal, every inch of dirt. This isn't just property to you, it's home. It was my home, with William. And now it's your home alone. Or it should be. Samuel's voice was steady. I can't give my children what this place could give them. But I can't take it from you either. Not when I see what it means. Clara stared at him. You'd really give it up? Half of everything just like that? For my children, I'd give up more than that. But where would you go? What would you do? Find work somewhere. Keep moving until I find a place that'll have us. Samuel looked toward the barn. We've done it before. We can do it again." Clara thought of the children, of Grace trying so hard to be mother and daughter at once, of Thomas working himself to exhaustion to prove he could, of little Charles who still laughed despite everything, and baby Lily, who would never know the mother who died giving her life. "What if," Clara said slowly, "there was another option?" Samuel looked at her. "What if we didn't split anything? What if we shared it? Shared it how?" Clara hadn't known she was going to say this until the words were coming out. "Partners, legal partners. We run the ranch together, make decisions together, split the profits equally." She swallowed. "You and your children live here, not in the barn in the house, and we build something. Together." Samuel didn't speak for a long moment. "Why?" he finally asked. "After everything, after the way I showed up after—" "Because I'm tired." Clara's voice cracked. "I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of waking up in an empty house and going to bed in an empty house and living every single day with no one to talk to except the cattle." She wiped at her eyes, angry at herself for the tears. "I spent 10 years trying to have a family. 10 years hoping. And now you show up with 8 children who need someone to care about them, and I'm supposed to what? Send them away because I'm angry. Let them starve because my husband lied to me. Clara, I know it doesn't make sense. I know we're strangers. I know people will talk." She laughed bitterly. "Wade already warned me about that. But I don't care. I don't care what people say. I care about—" She stopped, breathed, started again. "I found something in those documents. Medical papers. From 8 years ago." Samuel went still. William was sterile. The word came out flat. Couldn't father children. And he knew. He knew for 8 years, and he never told me. He let me blame myself. Let me think I was broken. Let me suffer. Clara, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just understand. Clara met his eyes. Your brother robbed me of something. The chance to know the truth. The chance to make different choices. The chance to have what you have, a family. She gestured toward the barn, toward the children sleeping there. You have 8 children who lost their mother. I spent 10 years crying for children I couldn't have because my husband was too much of a coward to tell me the truth. Clara's voice hardened. I'm not going to let his cowardice keep stealing from me, not anymore. Samuel was quiet for a long time. What exactly are you proposing? Legal partnership. Official documents filed with Judge Morrison. Equal ownership, equal responsibility, equal say in everything. Clara straightened. Your children would have a home, a real home. Not charity, not temporary permanent. And I would have... She stopped. What would you have? Samuel asked softly. Clara looked at the stars. A purpose, maybe. Something to wake up for that isn't just survival. The silence stretched between them. Clara could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Samuel spoke. My children come first. Always. Every decision I make for them. I understand. They've been through enough. Losing their mother, losing our home, living on the edge of nothing for months. If we do this, I need to know they'll be safe, that they'll be cared for, that if something happens to me, they'll be mine. Clara said it before she could second-guess herself. Legally, I'll adopt them, all 8, so that no matter what happens, they have someone. Samuel's breath caught. You'd do that. I'd do more than that. Clara stood up. I'd raise them as my own. Love them as my own. Give them everything I've been saving for children who never came. She walked to the edge of the porch and looked out at the darkness. I spent 10 years praying for one child. One. And God never answered. She turned back to Samuel. Maybe this is the answer. Maybe this is what I was supposed to have all along. Not a baby of my own, but 8 children who need me. Her voice dropped. Who might even want me? Samuel stood. He walked to her closer than he'd ever stood before. "They'll want you," he said quietly. "How could they not?" Clara felt tears threaten again. "You don't know that. I know my children. They've been watching you all week. The way you cook for them, teach them, treat them like they matter." Samuel's voice was rough. "They already love you, Clara. They just don't know it yet." Clara wiped her eyes. "This is insane." "Probably. People will think we've lost our minds." "Probably. Wade will make our lives hell." "Let him try." Samuel's jaw set. "I've faced worse than a greedy neighbor." Clara looked at this man, this stranger who had appeared on her doorstep just days ago. This man who had given her the truth about William, who had offered to walk away with nothing, who put his children above everything else. "We're really doing this?" she asked. Samuel held out his hand. "Partners." Clara took it. His grip was strong, calloused, warm despite the cold. "Partners." The next morning, Clara called a family meeting. All 8 children gathered in the kitchen. They sat in the same seats they'd claimed that first breakfast, but they looked different now. Less scared, more curious. Samuel stood near the door, letting Clara take the lead. "I have something to tell you all," she began. "Something important." Grace's expression tightened. She was expecting bad news. Clara could see her preparing to be strong for her siblings. "Your father and I have made a decision." Clara looked at each child in turn. "You're not going anywhere. This is your home now. Permanently." Silence. Then Ruth Ann spoke, voice trembling. "What do you mean permanently?" "I mean you're staying. All of you. We're going to be partners, your father and I. We're going to run this ranch together. And you're all going to live here in this house as family." Charles, the 6-year-old, looked up at his father. "Really, Pa?" Samuel nodded. "Really. But—" Grace started, then stopped. Clara could see her struggling to process, to believe. "I know this is a lot," Clara said. "I know you barely know me, but I want to try. I want us to try." She swallowed. "I never had children of my own. I always wanted them, but it never happened. And now I have the chance to have 8 at once, if you'll have me." The room was completely still. Then Eliza, the 7-year-old, with the charcoal-stained fingers, slid off her chair. She walked to Clara, reached up, and took her hand. "Are you going to be our mama now?" Clara's heart stopped. She looked at Samuel. He nodded slightly. "If you want me to be," Clara whispered. Eliza considered this with the seriousness only a child could muster. "Okay, but you have to let me draw your picture." Clara laughed. It came out wet, choked with tears she couldn't stop. "I'd like that." One by one, the other children moved. Ruth Ann came next, then Charles, then the rest. They gathered around Clara, not quite hugging, but close. Present. Grace hung back the longest. She watched her siblings, watched Clara, watched her father. "You mean it?" she asked finally. "You're not going to change your mind. You're not going to send us away." "Never," Clara said. "I promise you, Grace, never." The girl moved then. She didn't hug Clara, that would come later, but she stood beside her, close enough to touch. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Samuel watched from the doorway, and Clara saw something on his face she hadn't seen before. Hope. Real hope. That evening, Clara walked to the empty room at the end of the hall. The nursery. The room she'd kept closed for 10 years. She opened the door. The cradle was still there, covered in dust. The yellow walls had faded. The mobile William had hung tiny wooden horses had stilled long ago. Clara stepped inside, ran her fingers over the cradle's edge. "I waited for you for so long," she whispered to the children who never came. "I dreamed about you, named you, loved you before you existed." She picked up the mobile. The horses swayed gently. "But you weren't meant to be mine. I understand that now." She set the mobile down. "These children are mine instead. And I'm going to love them just as much as I would have loved you." She closed the door behind her when she left, but she didn't lock it. Tomorrow she would clean this room, paint over the yellow with something fresh, remove the cradle, pack it away with the dreams it represented. And then she would fill this room with something new, something real, something alive. But tonight she let herself grieve, just one more time. For the children she never had. For the husband who betrayed her. For the decade of hope that ended in ashes. She cried in the darkness, silent and alone. And when she was done, she wiped her face, straightened her shoulders, and walked back to the kitchen. 8 children were waiting. A new life was beginning. And Clara Bennett was done looking backward. 2 weeks after Clara made her decision, Cornelius Wade made his move. It started with whispers. Clara heard them in town when she went for supplies. Women who used to smile at her now turned away. Men who used to tip their hats suddenly found something interesting to look at on the ground. "Shameful," she heard Mrs. Patterson say to another woman outside the general store. Living with a strange man and all those children, and her husband not cold in the ground 6 months. Clara kept walking, head high, shoulders back, but it stung. At the general store, Mr. Henderson took longer than usual to fill her order. His eyes kept darting to the window like he was checking if anyone was watching. "Anything else, Mrs. Bennett?" "That's all." He totaled her purchases. The number was higher than usual. "Prices went up?" he said before she could ask. "Supply issues." Clara looked at him. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Supply issues," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." She paid without arguing, but when she stepped outside, she saw Cornelius Wade standing across the street watching her with that cold smile of his. He tipped his hat. Clara didn't acknowledge him. That night she told Samuel what happened. "He's turning the town against us," she said. "Wade's got influence, money. He's using both." Samuel's jaw tightened. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet, but we need to be careful." The next day Thomas came home with a bloody nose. Grace brought him in holding a rag to his face while he tried not to cry. The other children crowded behind them, faces pale. "What happened?" Clara demanded. "Some boys in town." Grace's voice shook with anger. They said terrible things about you, Mrs. Clara. About Pa." Thomas tried to make them stop. Clara knelt in front of Thomas. The boy's eyes were red, but he was holding back tears with everything he had. "Let me see," she said gently. He lowered the rag. His nose was swollen, bleeding, but not broken. "Does it hurt?" "No, ma'am." "Liar." Clara almost smiled, but a brave one. She cleaned his face carefully, dabbing away blood, checking for damage. The whole time, Thomas watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You shouldn't have fought them," she said. "They were saying lies. People say lies all the time. Fighting doesn't make them stop." "Then what does—" Clara paused. Thought about it. "Living well," she said finally. "Being happy. Showing them that their words don't matter." She finished cleaning his face. "Can you do that for me? Can you be happy, even when people are cruel?" Thomas considered this with the seriousness of a 10-year-old who had already seen too much of the world. "I can try. That's all I ask." That night Samuel found her on the porch, staring at nothing. "Thomas is asleep," he said. "Grace is watching the little ones." "Good." He sat beside her, close but not touching. "This is my fault." "Don't start. If I hadn't come here, then you and 8 children would be starving in a shack somewhere." Clara turned to face him. "This isn't your fault. This is Wade's fault. This is small-minded people's fault. Don't take blame that doesn't belong to you." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "Mary used to say something like that." "Your wife?" "She always said I took too much on my shoulders, that I tried to carry weight that wasn't mine to carry." His voice softened. She was usually right. Clara looked at him, really looked. At the lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples, the way exhaustion had carved itself into his features. "Tell me about her," she said. Samuel's breath caught. "What?" "Mary. Tell me about her. What was she like? How did you meet?" He didn't answer for a long time. Clara thought maybe she'd pushed too far, asked too much. Then he started talking. "We met at a church social. I was 19, she was 17. Prettiest girl in the county, and for some reason, she looked at me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I couldn't string two words together, just stood there like an idiot. She thought it was charming." "Was it?" "No, I was terrified." The smile faded. "But she saw something in me, something I didn't see in myself. She said I had a good heart even if I didn't know how to show it." Clara listened as he talked. About their wedding, small and simple. About their first home, a one-room cabin with a dirt floor. About the children coming one after another, and how Mary had welcomed each one like a gift. "She never complained," Samuel said. "Even when things were hard. Even when we had nothing. She'd look at those children and say, 'We're rich, Sam. Can't you see how rich we are?'" His voice broke. Clara reached out and took his hand. He gripped it like a drowning man. "When she died..." He stopped, started again. "When she died, I didn't know how to keep going. The only reason I got out of bed was because the children needed me. They were the only thing that kept me alive. They still need you." "I know." Samuel looked at her. "But now they have you too. And that makes all the difference." Clara felt something shift between them, something she wasn't ready to name. "We should get some sleep," she said, pulling her hand back. "Tomorrow's going to be long." Samuel nodded, but neither of them moved. They sat on the porch together until the stars came out, not speaking, not touching, just existing in the same space. And somehow, that was enough. 3 days later, Wade escalated. Clara was in town again, picking up a part for the plow that had broken. She had just stepped out of the blacksmith shop when she saw them. A group of men, 5 or 6 of them, standing in a semicircle blocking her path. Wade was at the center. "Mrs. Bennett." His smile was all teeth. "We need to talk." Clara didn't back down. "I have nothing to say to you." "That's fine. You can listen." Wade stepped closer. "This situation of yours, it's causing problems. People are uncomfortable. They don't like what they're seeing." "What exactly are they seeing?" "A widow, living with a man who isn't her husband, raising children that aren't hers." Wade's voice hardened. "It's not decent, it's not proper, and it needs to stop." Clara felt anger rising. "My living arrangements are none of your business. Everything in this town is my business." Wade's eyes glittered. "I own half the buildings on this street. I employ half the men. When I say something needs to change, it changes." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Clara looked at the men surrounding her. Some of them looked uncomfortable. Others looked eager. All of them looked like they'd follow Wade's orders without question. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. Sell me your land. Take a fair price. Move somewhere else and start fresh." Wade shrugged. "Nobody has to get hurt." "And if I refuse?" "Then things get difficult." Wade leaned in. "For you. For that man of yours. For those children." He smiled. 8 children, Mrs. Bennett. That's a lot of mouths to feed. A lot of things that could go wrong." Clara's blood ran cold. "You're threatening children." "I'm stating facts. Children get sick. Children have accidents. It's a dangerous world." Wade straightened. "But it doesn't have to be. Sell me the land and everyone stays safe." Clara wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. She wanted to claw Wade's eyes out and make him pay for every word. Instead, she smiled. "You know what, Mr. Wade? You're right. It is a dangerous world." She stepped closer, close enough to smell the tobacco on his breath. "But I've survived worse than you, and I'll survive this too." She pushed past him and walked away. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was out of sight. When she got home, she told Samuel everything. His face went pale, then red, then something darker. "I'll kill him." "No, you won't." "He threatened the children, Clara. Our children. Our children." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She hadn't expected them, hadn't expected how much they would mean. "I know what he did, but killing him won't solve anything. It'll just give him what he wants." Clara grabbed Samuel's arm. "Think. If you attack Wade, you go to prison. The children lose you. I lose the ranch. He wins everything." Samuel's jaw clenched. "Then what do we do?" "We fight smart. We find his weakness. Everyone has one." What's Wade's weakness? Clara didn't know, but she was going to find out. 2 days later, she went to see Judge Morrison. "Cornelius Wade," she said without preamble. "Tell me everything." The judge's eyebrows rose. "That's a broad request." "He threatened my family. He's trying to take my land. I need to know what I'm dealing with." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "What do you want to know? How did he get so powerful? Where does his money come from? What skeletons does he have in his closet?" The judge was quiet for a moment. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Bennett." "I know, but I'm not the one who started it." Morrison studied her. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he started talking. "Cornelius Wade came to this territory 15 years ago with nothing but the clothes on his back. Within 5 years, he owned the biggest ranch in the county. Within 10, he controlled half the businesses in town." Morrison paused. "A man doesn't rise that fast without cutting corners." "What kind of corners?" "The worst kind." Morrison lowered his voice. "There were rumors early on about homesteaders who sold their land to Wade. Some said they didn't sell willingly. Some said they didn't sell at all." "What happened to them?" "They left. Disappeared. Nobody knows where they went." Morrison's expression darkened. "One family, the Hendersons, the ones who owned the general store before the current Henderson they refused to sell. 2 weeks later, their barn burned down, with their horses inside." Clara felt sick. "And nobody did anything. Wade has friends in high places. The sheriff at the time was on his payroll. So were half the judges in the territory." Morrison spread his hands. "People learned not to cross him." "But you're not on his payroll." "No, I'm not." Morrison's voice hardened. "My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. Wade offered to pay for her treatment if I'd rule in his favor on a land dispute. I refused." He paused. "She died anyway. But at least I can live with myself." Clara felt a surge of respect for this man. "Thank you for telling me." "Don't thank me yet. Knowledge won't protect you from Wade. He's ruthless, Mrs. Bennett, and he doesn't lose." "Neither do I." She walked home with her mind racing. Wade was dangerous, more dangerous than she'd realized. But he wasn't invincible. He had enemies. Morrison was proof of that. And where there were enemies, there were allies. She just had to find them. That night, fever struck. It was Lily the baby. She had been fussy all day, but Clara hadn't thought much of it. Babies were fussy. It was their nature. But when she picked Lily up after supper, her skin was burning. Samuel. He was there in seconds. His face went white when he touched his daughter's forehead. "She's on fire." Clara was already moving. "Get me cool water, clean cloths, now." The next hours were a blur. They worked together, Clara and Samuel, fighting the fever that threatened to take his youngest child. They bathed her in cool water. They forced sips of willow bark tea between her lips. They took turns holding her, walking with her, willing her to survive. The other children gathered in the doorway, silent, terrified. Grace held Ruth Ann's hand. Thomas stood rigid, jaw clenched, trying to be brave. "Is Lily going to die?" Charles asked in a small voice. Clara looked at him. At all of them. 8 children who had already lost their mother, and couldn't bear to lose anyone else. "No," she said firmly. "She's not. I won't let her." It was a promise she had no right to make. But she made it anyway. Sometime after midnight, Lily's fever broke. Clara felt it happen, the sudden coolness of the baby's skin, the change in her breathing. She looked down at the tiny face, peaceful now in sleep, and burst into tears. Samuel held her while she cried. His arms around her, his voice in her ear telling her it was all right, telling her they had done it, telling her Lily was going to live. When Clara finally pulled back, she saw that his face was wet too. "Thank you," he said. "I couldn't have if you hadn't—" "Hush." Clara wiped her eyes. "She's mine too. You said so yourself. Our children." Samuel stared at her. And then he did something he had never done before. He kissed her. It was brief, gentle, more question than statement. When he pulled back, his eyes were uncertain. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." "But, Samuel—" Clara took his face in her hands. "Don't apologize." She kissed him back. In the doorway, Grace watched. She didn't say anything, but for the first time since her mother died, she smiled. The next morning, Wade's men set fire to the north pasture. Samuel saw the smoke first. He ran out shouting for Thomas and Henry to bring buckets. Clara grabbed the younger children and pulled them away from danger. They fought the fire for hours, beat it back with wet blankets, dug trenches to stop its spread, worked until their arms gave out and their lungs burned from smoke. When it was finally over, a quarter of their grazing land was gone. Samuel stood in the ashes, face black with soot, hands blistered and bleeding. This was Wade. "We don't know that." "Yes, we do." He turned to her. "He said things would get difficult. He said accidents happen. This wasn't an accident, Clara. This was a message." Clara looked at the destroyed pasture, at the cattle that would have to be moved, the feed that would be more expensive now, the damage that would take years to repair. "Then we send a message back." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we will." Clara took his hand. "He wants us to break. He wants us to give up. We won't give him that satisfaction." Samuel squeezed her hand. "Together. Together." 2 days later, Clara rode to the Morrison ranch. She had been thinking about what the judge said, about the families who had stood against Wade and lost, about the Henderson barn, about the homesteaders who disappeared. But she had also been thinking about something else, something Morrison mentioned almost in passing. There had been a land dispute, one that Wade wanted ruled in his favor, one that Morrison had refused to fix for him. What happened to that dispute? Morrison was surprised to see her. "Mrs. Bennett, is something wrong? I need to ask you about something." Clara sat across from him. "You mentioned a land dispute, the one Wade tried to bribe you over. What was it about?" Morrison's expression shifted. "Why do you want to know?" "Because I think it might be connected to what's happening now." The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner of his office. "This is confidential," he said, pulling out a folder. "But under the circumstances, I think you have a right to know." He handed her the file. Clara opened it and started reading. Her hands began to shake. "This is— yes. But if this is true—" "It is true. Every word." Clara looked up at Morrison. "Why hasn't anyone used this against him?" "Because the only witness disappeared. Without testimony, it's just paper, and paper doesn't hold up against money and power." Clara stared at the documents. Evidence of fraud, evidence of forgery, evidence that Cornelius Wade had stolen land from rightful owners through fake deeds and forged signatures, including the land that bordered her ranch. "This could destroy him," she said, "if you had proof, if you had witnesses." Morrison shook his head. "The people who could testify are either dead, missing, or too scared to talk." Clara thought of Samuel, of the children, of everything they had built in such a short time. What if I found a witness? Then Wade would be finished. Morrison leaned forward. But Mrs. Bennett, anyone who speaks against Wade puts a target on their back. Are you willing to risk that? To risk your family? Clara thought of Lily's fever, of Thomas's bloody nose, of the fire in the north pasture. Wade was already targeting her family. The only question was whether she would fight back. Yes, she said. I'm willing. That night, Clara told Samuel everything. This is dangerous, he said when she finished. More dangerous than anything we've faced. I know. If Wade finds out what you're doing, he won't. Not until it's too late. Samuel was quiet. Clara could see him thinking, weighing risks, calculating odds. What do you need me to do? He finally asked. Clara felt her heart swell. No argument, no trying to talk her out of it, just trust. Keep the children safe, keep the ranch running, let me handle Wade. I don't like sitting on the sidelines. I know, but the children need you here. They need stability. Clara touched his face. This is what I can do. Let me do it. Samuel caught her hand, held it against his cheek. Be careful. I will. Promise me. Clara leaned forward and kissed him. I promise. The next morning, she rode out to find the missing witness. She had a name, an address, a hope, and the knowledge that everything, her ranch, her family, her future, depended on what she found. Clara rode for 3 hours before she found the cabin. It was hidden in a valley most people didn't know existed, tucked behind a ridge that looked impassable unless you knew the trail. Judge Morrison had drawn her a map, warned her the woman might not talk, might not even open the door. But Clara had to try. She dismounted and approached slowly. Before she could knock, the door cracked open. A rifle barrel appeared. That's far enough. Clara raised her hands. I'm not here to cause trouble. Then why are you here? I'm looking for Martha Henderson. Silence. The rifle didn't move. My name is Clara Bennett. Judge Morrison sent me. He said you might be able to help. More silence. Then the door opened wider, revealing a woman in her 60s, gray-haired, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. Morrison sent you? Yes, ma'am. Why? Clara lowered her hands. Because Cornelius Wade is trying to take my land, and I think he did the same thing to you. Martha Henderson stared at her for a long moment. Then she lowered the rifle. You'd better come inside. The cabin was small but clean. Martha poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Clara, rifle still within reach. What do you know about Wade? She asked. I know he's a thief. I know he forges documents. I know people who stand against him tend to disappear. Clara met her eyes. And I know you used to own the general store in town, before Wade burned your barn and drove you out. Martha's face hardened. He didn't just burn the barn. He killed my husband. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. What? Everyone thinks Daniel left. That we sold the store and moved away. Martha's voice was flat. Truth is, Wade's men came in the middle of the night. They dragged Daniel out of bed and beat him. Said it was a warning. But they went too far. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup. He died 3 days later. Internal bleeding. There was nothing I could do. Clara couldn't speak. Wade sent men to the funeral. Said if I talked, my children would be next. Martha looked toward the window. So I took the money he offered, signed the papers, moved out here where nobody could find me. Let everyone think we'd sold and left. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Martha turned back to her. Wade doesn't lose, Mrs. Bennett. He destroys anyone who tries to fight him. If you go against him, you need to understand what you're risking. Clara thought of Samuel, of the children, of everything she had finally found after years of emptiness. I understand. Do you really? Martha leaned forward. I had 3 children when Daniel died. 3. I watched them grow up without a father because I was too scared to speak, too scared to fight. I've lived with that shame for 15 years. Then help me now. Clara reached across the table. Help me stop him. Help me make sure he never does this to anyone else. Martha's eyes filled with tears. He'll kill us. Both of us. Not if we're smarter than him. Not if we have proof. Clara squeezed her hand. Morrison has documents. Evidence of fraud, forgery, theft. All we need is someone to testify. Someone who can tell the court what really happened. The court is bought. Not all of it. Morrison isn't. And there are others. People who are tired of being afraid. Clara's voice strengthened. Wade has power because people believe he's untouchable. But he's not. He's just a man. And men can fall. Martha was silent for a long time. Clara watched emotions cross her face. Fear. Anger. Hope. Grief. If I testify, Martha finally said, and he comes for me, then you come live at my ranch, you and anyone else who needs protection. Clara's jaw set. I'm not asking you to stand alone. I'm asking you to stand with me. Martha looked at her. At this woman she'd never met, who had ridden hours to find her, who was offering to fight a battle that wasn't hers. Why? She asked. Why do you care so much? Clara thought about the question. Thought about everything that had brought her here. Because 6 months ago I had nothing. An empty house. An empty life. A dead husband who lied to me for years. She paused. Then a stranger showed up with 8 children and everything changed. I have a family now. A real family. And I'll be damned if I let Cornelius Wade take that away. Martha wiped her eyes. You love them. More than I thought possible. And the man Samuel. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Him too. Martha smiled. It was small, sad, but real. Daniel used to look at me the way you just looked when you said that name. She stood up. All right, Mrs. Bennett, I'll testify. God help us both, but I'll do it. Clara felt hope surge in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive long enough to get to court. Clara rode home faster than she'd come. The sun was setting when she reached the ranch, and she could see Samuel pacing on the porch. The moment he spotted her, he ran. Where have you been? I was worried sick. Clara dismounted and threw her arms around him. I found her. Martha Henderson. She's going to testify. Samuel pulled back to look at her face. She agreed. She lost her husband to Wade. He was killed, Samuel, beaten to death. She's been hiding for 15 years. Clara gripped his arms. But she's done hiding. She's going to help us. Samuel's expression shifted from relief to concern. Wade will find out. When he does, I know. That's why we need to move fast. Clara started toward the house. Where are the children? Inside, Grace is putting the little ones to bed. Clara stopped, turned back to him. Samuel, I need you to listen to me. What I'm about to do, it's going to be dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've faced. And I need to know you're with me. Samuel took her hands. I've been with you since the day you told me to stop calling you ma'am. That's not going to change. Clara felt tears threaten. Even if it means risking everything. Everything we have we built together. If we lose it together. He pulled her close. But we won't lose. Not if I have anything to say about it. The next morning, Clara rode back to Judge Morrison with her news. Martha Henderson is willing to testify. Morrison's eyes widened. You found her. I found her, and she has information, Judge. Wade killed her husband, covered it up, made it look like they'd simply left town. Morrison sat back heavily. Murder. That's more than I expected. It's enough to bring him down. If we can get to trial. Morrison rubbed his face. Wade has friends, Mrs. Bennett. Powerful friends. The moment he learns what we're planning, he'll move to stop us. Then we don't let him learn. Not until it's too late. Morrison studied her. You've changed. What do you mean? When you first came to my office, you were angry, defensive, ready to fight the world. He almost smiled. Now you're focused, strategic. You've found something worth fighting for. Clara thought of Samuel, of the children, of the life they were building together. Yes, she said. I have. 2 days later, Wade made his next move. Clara was in the barn with Thomas teaching him how to check the horse's hooves when Grace came running. Mrs. Clara, men are coming. Clara handed the hoof pick to Thomas. Stay here. Keep your brothers and sisters inside. She walked out to meet the riders. 4 men. Wade in front. Mrs. Bennett. Wade dismounted. I hear you've been busy. Clara kept her face neutral. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Wade stepped closer. Word is, you've been asking questions, visiting people who don't want to be visited, stirring up trouble that's been settled for years. Is that what you call it? Settled. I call it done. Wade's voice hardened. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. Now. Before someone gets hurt. Is that another threat? It's a promise. Wade looked toward the house. 8 children, Mrs. Bennett. That's a lot of responsibility. Would be a shame if something happened to one of them. Samuel appeared in the doorway. His hand rested on the rifle at his side. You need to leave, he said. Wade turned. Mr. Hawkins, we haven't been formally introduced. And we won't be. Get off our land. Wade smiled. Cold. Predatory. Your land. That's interesting. Last I checked, you showed up here a few weeks ago with nothing but a piece of paper and a sob story. And now I have a home, a family, a reason to fight. Samuel stepped off the porch. You don't scare me, Wade. I've faced worse than you. Have you? Wade moved closer. Have you faced watching your children suffer, watching them go hungry, watching them get hurt because their father was too stubborn to know when he was beaten? Samuel's jaw clenched. Are you threatening my children? I'm offering you a choice. Take your family and leave. I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else, somewhere far from here. Wade spread his hands. Everyone wins. Except Clara. Clara Bennett is a widow who should have sold this land months ago. She's not your problem. Samuel laughed. It was harsh, bitter. You don't understand anything, do you? Clara isn't my problem. She's my partner, my family. He stepped even closer to Wade. And if you touch her, if you touch any of my children, I will end you. Wade's smile flickered, just for a moment. But Clara saw it. He was surprised. He hadn't expected Samuel to fight back. You're making a mistake, Wade said quietly. No, you are. Samuel gestured toward the road. Now get off our land, and don't come back. Wade stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned, mounted his horse, and rode away. His men followed. Clara didn't breathe until they were out of sight. That was dangerous, she said. It was necessary. Samuel turned to her. He needed to know we won't back down. Now he'll come at us harder. Then we'd better be ready. That night, Clara gathered everyone in the main room. Samuel sat beside her. The children arranged themselves around the floor, oldest to youngest. Even baby Lily was there, asleep in Grace's arms. I need to tell you all something, Clara began. There's a bad man who wants to take our home. His name is Cornelius Wade, and he's been threatening us. The children exchanged glances. They weren't surprised. They'd heard things, seen things. What are we going to do? Thomas asked. We're going to fight him, but not with fists or guns. Clara looked at each of them. We're going to fight him with the truth. We have evidence that he's done terrible things, and we're going to make sure everyone knows. Will it work?" Grace's voice was steady, but Clara could see the fear in her eyes. "I don't know, but I know that running isn't an option. This is our home. We built it together, and I'm not giving it up without a fight." Ruth Ann raised her hand. "Can we help?" Clara felt her heart clench. 9 years old, and she wanted to help fight a monster. "You can help by being brave, by sticking together, by not letting fear win." Clara reached out and touched Ruth Ann's cheek. "Can you do that?" Ruth Ann nodded solemnly. "What about the little ones?" Henry asked. "What if Wade comes for them?" Samuel spoke up. "No one is going to hurt anyone in this family. I promise you that. I will protect you with my life if I have to." "So will I," Clara added. "We both will." Charles, the 6-year-old, crawled into Clara's lap. "I'm not scared," he announced. Clara hugged him tight. "Neither am I." It was a lie. She was terrified. But sometimes lies were necessary to keep the people you love safe. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Clara met with Morrison 3 more times, refining their strategy. Martha Henderson came to stay at the ranch, armed with documents and testimony. Samuel fortified the property, set up watch schedules, prepared for the worst. And the children adapted with resilience that broke Clara's heart. Grace took over more household duties without being asked. Thomas and Henry patrolled the boundaries. Ruth Ann helped Martha organize paperwork. Even little Eliza contributed her drawings, becoming a source of comfort for the younger children. On the 8th day, they were ready. Morrison filed the papers that morning. By afternoon, the whole town knew. Clara Bennett was taking Cornelius Wade to court. Wade's response came at sundown. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard the shot. She ran outside to find Samuel crouched behind the water trough, rifle in hand. "Get the children into the cellar," he shouted. "What's happening?" "Wade's men. They're in the tree line." Another shot cracked through the air. Clara didn't think. She ran inside, gathered the children, herded them toward the cellar door. "Everyone down, now. Don't come out until I say." Grace hesitated. "Mrs. Clara?" "Go." The children filed down into the darkness. Clara closed the door behind them and grabbed the shotgun from above the fireplace. Outside, Samuel had taken cover behind the porch railing. Martha was beside him, clutching her rifle with hands that shook. "How many?" Clara asked. "4, maybe 5. Samuel fired toward the trees. "They're not trying to hit us, just scare us." "It's working. Don't let them know that." Clara took position at the window. Her hands were steady, even though her heart was pounding. The shots continued for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Then suddenly they stopped. Silence. Clara waited. Samuel waited. Martha waited. A voice called out from the darkness. "This is your last warning, Bennett. Drop the lawsuit or next time we won't miss." Clara's blood boiled. She stood up before Samuel could stop her. "You go back and tell Wade something for me," she shouted. "Tell him I'm not afraid. Tell him he can send 100 men and I still won't back down. This is my home, my family, and I will die before I let him take it." Silence again, then the sound of horses, riding away. Clara's knees gave out. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. That was incredibly brave." "Also probably." He kissed her forehead. "Don't ever do that again." "I make no promises." Martha appeared beside them, still pale but steadier. "Is it over?" "For tonight." Clara straightened. "But they'll be back. Wade won't stop until someone makes him." "Then we make him." Martha's voice hardened. "Tomorrow, in court, we end this." Clara looked at Samuel, at the house where her children were hiding in the cellar, at the land she had fought for, bled for, loved for more than a decade. "Yes," she said, "we end this." The morning of the trial, Clara woke before dawn. Samuel was already up, standing at the window. She went to him, and he wrapped his arm around her. "Scared?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you're taking it seriously." Clara almost laughed. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not calm. I'm just good at hiding it." He turned her to face him. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know something." "What?" "When I showed up here with 8 children and a piece of paper, I thought I was ruining your life. I thought I was the worst thing that could have happened to you." His voice thickened. "But you turned it into something beautiful. You took my broken family and made it whole. You took me, a widower with nothing to offer, and made me feel like I mattered again." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel, let me finish." He cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Clara Bennett. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. And whatever happens today, whatever Wade tries to do, that's never going to change." Clara kissed him. Deep, desperate, full of everything she couldn't put into words. "I love you too," she whispered when they finally broke apart. "Now let's go destroy that son of a bitch." Samuel grinned. "That's my girl." The courtroom was packed. Clara sat at the front with Morrison and Martha. Samuel was in the gallery with the older children, Grace, Thomas, Henry, Ruth, Ann. The younger ones stayed at the ranch with a neighbor Clara trusted. Wade sat across the aisle, surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits. He looked smug, confident. Clara wanted to wipe that look off his face. The judge called the court to order. Morrison presented their case. The documents, the evidence of fraud, the pattern of intimidation. Then Martha took the stand. "Mrs. Henderson," Morrison began, "can you tell the court about your experience with Cornelius Wade?" Martha's voice shook at first, but as she talked, it grew stronger. She told them about the threats, the fire, her husband's death, the cover-up that followed. The courtroom was silent. Wade's lawyers objected. Repeatedly. The judge overruled them. Repeatedly. By the time Martha finished, Clara could see something had shifted. People who had been afraid to meet her eyes were now looking at Wade with disgust. Then came the cross-examination. Wade's lead lawyer was smooth, practiced. He tried to discredit Martha, paint her as a bitter woman, making false accusations. But Martha held firm. "Mrs. Henderson, isn't it true that you accepted payment from Mr. Wade for your property?" "Yes, because he threatened to kill my children if I didn't." "Isn't it possible you're exaggerating these so-called threats?" "My husband is dead. That's not an exaggeration." The lawyer faltered, just for a moment. But Clara saw it, and so did the jury. After Martha stepped down, Morrison called his final witness. Clara Bennett. She walked to the stand with her head high, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Morrison led her through her testimony, the threats Wade had made, the fire in her pasture, the attack on her home. Then Wade's lawyer took over. "Mrs. Bennett, isn't it true that you've been living with a man who is not your husband?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Samuel Hawkins is my partner in the ranch." "But not your husband." "Not yet." Murmurs in the courtroom. "And isn't it true that this man, this stranger, showed up claiming to be your dead husband's brother and demanding half your property? He had legal documents proving his identity. Judge Morrison verified them himself." "So you're saying you welcomed a complete stranger into your home, a stranger with 8 children and no money?" "I'm saying I recognized an opportunity when I saw one." Clara leaned forward. "I spent 10 years married to a man who lied to me. 10 years hoping for children that never came because my husband was too much of a coward to tell me the truth about his condition." The courtroom went silent. "Samuel Hawkins gave me something William never could. A family. 8 children who call me mother. A partner who treats me as an equal. A reason to wake up in the morning." Clara's voice rang through the room. "So yes, I welcomed him. And I would do it again. Because sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. She looked directly at Wade. And sometimes the worst monsters wear expensive suits and smile while they threaten children. Wade's face went red. The judge called for order, and Clara knew in that moment that they had won. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Clara sat in the courtroom, hands clasped so tight her knuckles turned white. Samuel was beside her, his knee pressed against hers under the table. A small comfort. A reminder she wasn't alone. The children had been sent home with Martha, too young to watch their mother's fate decided by strangers, too innocent to understand what was at stake. Morrison paced near the window. Even he seemed nervous. Wade sat across the aisle, still confident, still smiling. But Clara noticed something she hadn't seen before. His hands were shaking. Just slightly. Just enough. He was scared. Good. At 4 in the afternoon, the jury returned. Clara stood. Her legs felt like water. The foreman, a rancher named Thomas Burke, whom Clara had known for years, held a folded paper. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." Clara couldn't breathe. "On the charge of fraud, how does the jury find?" "Guilty." The word hit Clara like a physical blow. She grabbed Samuel's arm to steady herself. "On the charge of forgery." "Guilty." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson." "Guilty." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder." Silence. The courtroom held its breath. "Guilty." The room erupted. Wade shot to his feet. "This is absurd. You can't—" "Sit down, Mr. Wade." The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "The jury has spoken." Clara turned to look at Wade. His face was purple with rage. His lawyers were already arguing, objecting, demanding appeals. But it was over. She could see it in his eyes. He had lost. Morrison grabbed her hand. "We did it." Clara couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face, and she didn't care who saw. Samuel pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over." But it wasn't. Not quite. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Clara attended alone. Samuel stayed with the children. There was no need for them to see Wade again. The judge read the sentence in a flat, emotionless voice. 20 years for fraud, 15 for forgery, life for conspiracy to murder. Wade would die in prison. As the bailiffs led him away, Wade turned. His eyes found Clara in the gallery. "This isn't over," he said. Clara stood, met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, it is." They took him away. The doors closed behind him, and Clara finally let herself breathe. That night, the ranch was quiet. The children were asleep. Martha had returned to her cabin, promising to visit soon. The animals were settled. Clara and Samuel sat on the porch watching the stars. "Hard to believe it's done," Samuel said. "I keep waiting for something else to go wrong. Maybe nothing will." He took her hand. "Maybe we finally get to just live." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "That sounds nice." "It does." They sat in comfortable silence. Clara thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the fighting, the moments when she was sure they would lose everything. But they hadn't lost. They had won. "Samuel." "I want to get married." He turned to look at her. "What?" "Married. You and me. Legal. Official." Clara met his eyes. "I know we said we were partners, but I want more than that. I want to be your wife." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Clara felt her heart hammering. "I wanted to ask you," he finally said. "What?" "I've been carrying a ring around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." He laughed softly. "I should have known you'd beat me to it." Clara laughed too. It came out wet, mixed with tears she didn't try to hide. "Is that a yes?" That's a yes. Samuel pulled her close. That's the biggest yes of my life. They kissed under the stars, and for the first time in longer than Clara could remember, she felt truly completely happy. The wedding was simple. They held it at the ranch in the field where Clara had first learned to love this land. Judge Morrison officiated. Martha stood as witness. And the children, all 8 of them, lined up in their best clothes, watching their father marry the woman who had become their mother. Grace held baby Lily. Thomas stood straight and tall, trying to look grown up. Ruth Ann cried happy tears. Eliza sketched the scene on a piece of paper she'd smuggled in her pocket. Henry and Charles fidgeted until Grace shushed them. Sarah clutched her doll and smiled. Clara wore her mother's dress altered to fit. Simple white cotton. Nothing fancy. But when Samuel saw her walking toward him, his eyes filled with tears. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself." Morrison cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was short. Clara had never liked long speeches. "Do you, Samuel Jacob Hawkins, take Clara Ruth Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Clara Ruth Bennett, take Samuel Jacob Hawkins to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at this man who had changed everything, who had given her a family when she thought she'd never have one, who had stood beside her through threats and fire and fear. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Morrison smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Samuel kissed her. The children cheered, and Clara Bennett became Clara Hawkins. The first year of marriage was hard, not because of any problems between them. Clara and Samuel fit together like pieces of a puzzle, complementing each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. But rebuilding was difficult. The fire had destroyed a quarter of their grazing land. Wade's intimidation had cost them business relationships. The trial had drained resources. They worked from dawn to dusk. Clara handled the finances, the planning, the negotiations. Samuel managed the physical labor, the animals, the repairs. And the children helped with everything. Grace became Clara's right hand, learning to manage the household with efficiency that belied her 13 years. Thomas and Henry took on more ranch work, growing stronger and more capable by the day. Ruth Ann tutored the younger children in reading and arithmetic. Even the little ones contributed. Eliza's drawings became popular in town. People paid actual money for her sketches of horses and landscapes. Charles collected eggs and fed chickens. Sarah helped with laundry and cooking. And Lily, now walking and talking in her 2nd year, became everyone's favorite distraction. By the end of that first year, the ranch was thriving again. Better than before, actually. They had expanded the herd, repaired all the fences, added a new barn. The pasture was recovering grass, growing back stronger than ever. Clara stood on the porch one evening, watching Samuel chase Charles across the yard, while Lily giggled from Ruth Ann's arms. Morrison rode up, dismounted, tipped his hat. "Mrs. Hawkins?" "Judge." Clara smiled. "What brings you out here?" "Good news, actually." He reached into his saddlebag. "The territory just finalized Wade's property seizure. His lands are being divided among the families he wronged." Clara's breath caught. And as the primary plaintiff in the case, you've been awarded the parcel that borders your eastern property." Morrison handed her a document. 200 acres free and clear. Clara stared at the paper. 200 acres. Land that Wade had stolen from Martha's family. Land that was now hers. "I can't accept this." Morrison looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because it should go to Martha. Her husband died for that land." "Martha was consulted. She's the one who suggested you receive it." Morrison's expression softened. "She said you earned it, that without you, Wade would still be destroying lives." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say thank you, and keep building something good here." Morrison mounted his horse. That's the best revenge against men like Wade. Living well." He rode away. Clara looked at the document again, then at her family scattered across the yard laughing and playing and living. Morrison was right. This was the best revenge. 2 years after the wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She hadn't believed it at first, hadn't let herself believe it. She was 37 years old. She had spent a decade being told she couldn't have children, but the signs were unmistakable. The nausea, the fatigue, the changes in her body she remembered from watching Mary, from watching other women. She told Samuel on a quiet evening after the children were asleep. His face went through 100 emotions in 10 seconds. Shock, disbelief, hope, fear, joy. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. But I thought William was the one who was sterile, not me." Clara laughed through her tears. "All those years I blamed myself, and it was never me." Samuel pulled her into his arms, held her like she might disappear. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby. Our baby." They told the children the next morning. Grace cried. Thomas tried not to, but failed. The little ones didn't fully understand but cheered anyway because everyone else seemed happy. "Another brother or sister?" Charles asked. "That's right." "I hope it's a boy. We need more boys." "Hey," Ruth Ann protested. "Girls are better." "Are not." "Are too." Clara laughed and let them argue. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara was older than most first-time mothers. Her body struggled with changes it should have handled years ago. She spent the last 2 months on bed rest. Samuel hovered, constantly terrified something would go wrong. The children took turns sitting with her, reading to her, keeping her company. Grace became the de facto mother of the household. At 15, she ran the house with an efficiency Clara envied. "You don't have to do everything," Clara told her. "Yes, I do." Grace smoothed Clara's blankets. "You took care of us when we had nothing. Now it's our turn." Clara grabbed her hand. "I love you, Grace. You know that, right? Not because I have to, because you're mine." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I know. I love you too, Mama." It was the first time Grace had called her that. Clara cried for an hour afterward. Happy tears. The best kind. The baby came on a cold December night. Labor was long and hard. Clara screamed until her throat was raw. Samuel held her hand until she nearly broke his fingers. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in her arms, everything else faded away. A boy. Red-faced and squalling and perfect. "Hello?" Clara whispered. "Hello, little one?" Samuel leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face. "He's beautiful. He's ours." They named him Daniel after Martha's husband, a tribute to the man whose death had set everything in motion. Martha cried when they told her. "You didn't have to. We wanted to." Clara squeezed her hand. "He deserves to be remembered." The children adored their new brother. They fought over who got to hold him, who got to feed him, who got to rock him to sleep. Clara watched her family, 9 children now, plus Samuel, plus Martha, who had become grandmother to them all, and felt something she had never expected to feel. Complete. 5 years passed. Daniel grew into an energetic, stubborn, joyful child. He had Clara's eyes and Samuel's stubbornness. 2 years after Daniel, Clara had another baby. A girl this time. They named her Mary after Samuel's first wife. 11 children total now. The house was bursting at the seams. They built an addition, then another. The ranch expanded to accommodate the growing family. Grace, now 20, married a young rancher named James, who moved to their land. A year later, she had a baby of her own. Clara became a grandmother at 39. "This is ridiculous," she told Samuel. "I'm too young to be a grandmother." "And yet," he grinned. "Grandma." "Don't call me that." He called her that constantly. She pretended to hate it. Thomas left to study law in the capital. He wanted to help families like theirs, families threatened by men like Wade. "I'll make you proud," he told Clara before he left. "You already have." Henry took over more ranch operations, proving himself a natural leader. Ruth Ann became a teacher at the local school. Eliza sold her paintings in galleries across the territory. Charles grew into a strong young man who could outwork anyone on the ranch. Sarah married a kind farmer and moved to the neighboring county. Little Lily, not so little anymore, trained as a midwife, helping bring new life into the world. And through it all, Clara and Samuel stood at the center. Partners, parents, grandparents, family. 20 years after Clara returned home to find strangers in her house, she stood on her porch and watched her family gather. It was Christmas. Everyone had come home. Grace and James with their 3 children. Thomas with his new wife. Ruth Ann with her fiancé. Henry and his growing family. Eliza still single but happy. Charles with a pretty girl everyone pretended not to notice. Sarah with her husband and twins. Lily with stories of the babies she had helped deliver. Daniel and Mary ran through the crowd, too young to understand the significance of the day, but old enough to feel the joy. Samuel came to stand beside her. His hair was gray now, his face lined with age. But his eyes were the same, kind, steady, full of love. "Quite a gathering," he said. "Quite a family." He took her hand, the same hand he had shaken 20 years ago when they agreed to be partners. "Any regrets?" Clara thought about the question, thought about everything she had lost, her first husband, her chance at children the traditional way, years of her life spent hoping for something that never came. But she also thought about what she had gained, a partner who treated her as an equal, children who called her mother and meant it, grandchildren who crawled into her lap and demanded stories, a life fuller than she had ever imagined. "No," she said, "not one." Samuel kissed her temple. "Good, because I don't either." They watched their family together, laughing, arguing, hugging, crying, making messes and making memories. Grace caught Clara's eye across the crowd and smiled. That same smile from 20 years ago, when a scared 12-year-old had decided to trust the angry widow who had threatened to throw them out. Clara smiled back. Later that night, after everyone had eaten and the children had finally fallen asleep, Clara and Samuel sat by the fire. The house was quiet, peaceful. "Remember the first night?" Samuel asked. "In the barn. How could I forget? I thought you were a con man. And I thought you were going to shoot me. I considered it." He laughed. "I know." Clara leaned against him. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For showing up, for not giving up, for giving me everything I never knew I wanted." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "I could say the same thing. When Mary died, I thought my life was over. I thought the best I could hope for was survival." He pulled her closer. "But then I found you, and you showed me that living and surviving aren't the same thing." Clara felt tears threaten. She didn't fight them. "I spent 10 years waiting for children who never came," she said. 10 years thinking I was broken. 10 years mourning what I couldn't have. And now, Clara thought of Daniel asleep in his bed, of Mary curled up with her cousins, of all the children who had grown up under this roof calling her mother. Now I have 11, plus grandchildren, plus great-grandchildren, probably the way Grace is going. She laughed through her tears. God has a sense of humor. The best kind. They sat in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. The house settled around them. Samuel. If you could go back, if you could do it all again, would you change anything? He thought about it, really thought. No, not one thing. He kissed her softly. Every hardship, every struggle, Every moment of fear, it all led here. To this house, to this family, to you. Clara closed her eyes. Let the warmth of the fire and the warmth of her husband surround her. I love you, Samuel Hawkins. I love you too, Clara Hawkins. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, the fire burned low. And the woman who had once come home to find strangers in her house finally understood what home really meant. 40 years after that first meeting, Clara Ruth Hawkins died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family. She was 75 years old. She had been married to Samuel for 39 years. She had 11 children, 42 grandchildren, and 28 great-grandchildren. Her funeral was the largest the county had ever seen. Samuel stood at her grave holding the hands of children who were now grandparents themselves. She was the strongest woman I ever knew, he said. She took a broken man and 8 hungry children and turned us into a family. She stood against corruption, fought for justice, and never backed down from anything. He paused, wiped his eyes. But more than that, she loved. She loved with everything she had, without reservation, without condition. She taught us that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, about showing up, about staying. He looked at the headstone, at the words carved into stone. Clara Ruth Hawkins. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She chose love. I'll be with you soon, my love, Samuel whispered. Wait for me. He lived another 2 years, died on Christmas morning, surrounded by the family Clara had helped him build. They buried him beside her. 100 years later, Stillwater Ranch still stands. It's run by the descendants of Clara and Samuel Hawkins, a family so large that reunions require multiple days and careful planning. Every year on Christmas Eve, they gather around the old fireplace and tell the story. The story of a widow who came home to find strangers in her house. The story of a widower who showed up with nothing but 8 children and a piece of paper. The story of 2 broken people who chose each other, chose love, chose family. The children listen with wide eyes. The adults listen with knowing smiles. And when the story ends, someone always asks the same question. Is it true? Did it really happen like that? And someone always gives the same answer. Every word. Because sometimes the best stories are the true ones. Sometimes the greatest gifts come in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes, just sometimes, losing half of everything is the only way to gain everything that really matters. Clara Bennett came home to find 8 children and a stranger in her house. She left this world with 11 children, 42 grandchildren, 28 great-grandchildren, and a legacy of love that would outlast generations. That's not a tragedy. That's a miracle. And miracles, as Clara always said, are just God's way of reminding us that the story isn't over until He says it is. The story of Clara and Samuel Hawkins ended with joy. But for their descendants, it was just the beginning.